Hey everyone, my name is Azo, and in this video, I'd like to share how you can identify brilliant but obscure moves by developing a mindset shift. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here it's white to play. Pause the video and find some plans for white. Alright, so hopefully, you realize that white needs to develop his queenside pieces, in particular, the b1 knight. The problem is the d4 pawn. It has precisely 3 attackers and 3 defenders. So if the b1 knight goes to either of his favorite squares, d2 or c3, it will interfere with our queen's or bishop's defensive task and d4 would hang. For those with keener tactical senses, you might even have seen as far as knight c3, knight takes d4, and knight a4 with a discovered attack, hitting the knight and the queen. However, unfortunately for white, black has the Zwischenzug, knight takes f3, or knight takes e2 with check. We don't have time to take the queen, we've got to take the knight, and now that the knight is no longer hanging on d4, black can simply save the queen and remain up a pawn. So what are we to do? Should we develop another piece? Should we allow a knight to settle for a worse square? Or should we just try to free up our other rook by throwing the a pawn up? This is a key moment in our thought process that distinguishes strong players from amateurs, and now I'm going to introduce the technique to you. So what are you supposed to do in such situations? Whenever you see a move you really like, but can't play it because of a single tactical resource, you should not simply abandon the idea and settle for a worse move. Instead, I recommend you look for preparatory moves to make your move work. Make knight c3 work in this case. Let me show you what I mean. The only reason you can't play knight c3 is because quote-unquote the stars are aligned for black. d4 has as many attackers as defenders, which means every one of black's attackers must be exactly where they are so that our knight cannot afford to interfere with our queen or our bishop. Displace one of the attackers and knight c3 is on the cards. Or you could overprotect d4 with queen d2 and rook d1, and again you've got knight c3 working. Additionally, after knight c3, knight takes d4 and knight a4, if knight takes e2 and knight takes f3 don't come with check, black is lost because of the dual threats. And therefore, another way to make knight c3 work is king h1, avoiding the check that will otherwise come 2 to 3 moves later. All of a sudden, we've got 3 significantly more appealing options to work with. From there, we can consider g4 to be the worst, because first of all, our king safety is considerably compromised. Black's king still has the option to castle on the opposite side, where g4 will be a target. Furthermore, he can play knight h4, trading an attacker for a defender. And we're left with the same problem. Knight c3 can be met with knight takes d4, which means we have unnecessarily created a number of weaknesses on the king's side. Queen d2 is a fine move, and we'll get knight c3 in 3 moves. 1 to move the queen up, 2 to overprotect d4, and 3 to get the knight out. But compare that to king h1, and we've got knight c3 on the very next move. And because white would want to fortify the center with f4 at some point, it'll be useful to have our king tucked in the corner already. So with that, the next time you see a move you like, but realize doesn't work, instead of settling for a worse alternative, consider just trying to make the move work by rectifying its tactical problem. With that, I want to demonstrate how this same technique can be used on opponent moves as well. Whenever your opponent is defending and hanging on by a single tactical resource, your task is now the opposite. You need to make your opponent's move not work by eliminating his sole defensive resource. Bearing this in mind, I'm going to show you a position taken from a game in a simultaneous exhibition by the great Alexander Alekhine playing white against his opponent Holscher playing black. It's white to play. What will you do here if you were Alekhine? Pause the video to work out the solution. Alright, so the first thing to recognize is that rook h8 doesn't work because black has the f7 escape square. If we play g6 to cover it, he has queen takes g6, and if we play queen c4, black isn't obliged to block his escape route and allow mate. Instead, he has d5, and black is absolutely fine. His king is safe, and he's up a piece and a pawn. So with this in mind, our plan should be centered around the following: covering the f7 square, dealing with the queen's control of g6, and finally, working around black's critical defensive resource, d5. And all of this brought Alekhine to the brilliant knight e5, threatening mate. If queen takes, then our pawn can safely move to g6 to threaten mate, and white is winning. And if pawn takes, then black no longer has the d5 resource. We'll go g6 to threaten mate still. And after queen takes, we have queen c4. And now it is clear that the inclusion of knight e5 and de5 makes all the difference. Black now must block on f7, and we have mate. And this brilliant find, knight to e5, can only be found by first identifying black's defensive ideas, then focusing on moves that combat them. So in sum, if a move you like doesn't work, aim to address the underlying issue. In this case, that will be the tactical issue of the unprotected d4 pawn, or that an eventual knight takes e2 or knight takes f3 would come with check. Conversely, if your opponent's success in attacking or defending hinges on a few resources, then your goal is to eliminate them, sometimes even at high costs. And that's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.